Oh, I didn't realize. Hi. I'm still new to using this. Hi, Shannon. Let's see, who else do we have? All right, guys. So I think this is going to be pretty informal. What I thought I'd do is just open it up and answer any questions that you guys may have about the product marketing interview process. For those of you who I haven't had a chance to meet, my name is Sheena Zhang, and I am an instructor at Real World Product Marketing. I also have my own product marketing consulting company. We basically help Silicon Valley's companies think through messaging, positioning, go-to-market, sales enablement, etc. I spent the better half of my career at Microsoft and Marketo in the US and in Asia. So really excited for you guys to join. There were a few questions that were submitted previously, but I actually think what would be best is on your right-hand side, there should be a way to chat or to ask questions. And so I encourage you guys to kind of ask away any questions that you may have. Hopefully you put some thought into this and you came prepared. So I'll just talk a little bit about when I'm hiring for product marketing, what that process looks like. So, you know, if you think about, first of all, what is product marketing? It means so many different things at different companies, whether that's on the quote, quote, technical or inbound side of the company, really focused on driving product features and roadmap and working closely with the product managers, or it's more on the outbound or go-to-market side. So that's more on working with sales and demand gen and customer success and business development and taking your product to market, driving messaging, driving positioning, go-to-market, etc. So I think the most important thing as you're going to interview for a product marketing job is clearly understanding and defining what is product marketing at that particular company. Is it inbound? So is it more internal facing and helping to drive features, function development, roadmap, beta, etc., working closely with product management? Or is it more, like I said, outbound, focused on go-to-market, enabling sales, enabling the demand gen team, and enabling the partner team, etc. I think sometimes when you get into a role and there's a mismatch in expectations of what success in that role actually looks like, we're kind of set up for failure. So that would be my number one tip as you're going and looking for a product marketing job or interviewing for a product marketing job. Ask the recruiter, and if that person doesn't give you a good answer, because sometimes they obviously are not close to the job, then actually talk to the hiring manager and say, hey, can you give me a sense of what are some of the day-to-day responsibilities? Am I responsible for working closely with product, with design, etc., or is it more go-to-market focus? So focusing more on like sales, customer success, etc. All right. Some other things that tips and tricks is that I always, when I'm hiring for product marketers, ask to see a sample of work. And my advice to you guys is to, especially those in Silicon Valley, it's a really competitive market, right? Like there's a lot of smart people, there's a lot of opportunities though as well. And I think one thing that you can really do to set yourself apart from other people is actually coming into that interview with a work sample, a portfolio, whether or not that person or the hiring manager actually asked for it. So a natural question might be, what should actually be in that portfolio? Well, obviously writing samples, any blog posts, any work that you've done for other companies that's public, and also like, protecting the innocent. So obviously it's not about sharing company secrets, but if you have any like persona work, any messaging work, any go-to-market work, etc., that you've done previously, I think that's really important as well. So let's see if we have any questions in here. Oops. So the way this works for those who are just joining now is that actually you should have a chat box. I see Justin, Shannon. Hi, Lauren. Hi, Al. Al's actually going to help answer some questions as well. For those of you who don't know Al, he's part of the Product Marketing Masters community, and he is actually in product marketing at Salesforce. So I'm sure he will be a great resource. He also does some coaching career stuff on the side. So I guess the ask for the 10 people that have joined us so far is to actually put in your questions. I don't have anything prepared. I'm kind of just talking. But if you have, any questions about your specific situation or anything like that, I'm happy to kind of talk through it. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep talking. Let's see. Yeah, let's see. Other things I look for when I'm interviewing for product marketers. So generally speaking, right, I call it like 3, 4 things that most product marketers have. So I look for like business acumen. So like, do you have a strategic mind that can think through like go-to-market strategy? I look for domain expertise. So are you super passionate about the product? Like for me, when I was a SQL Server product marketer, I have to be honest, I don't think I was like the most passionate about SQL Server, and I think that probably showed in my marketing, right? So, is this a space? Is this a product that you actually like really, really, really like and obsess over, for lack of a better term? Also, like messaging and positioning, so storytelling. Are you able to take a lot of different data points that are really complicated and disparate, and then distill them down into messaging that's memorable, that's concise, that's repeatable? Because especially in the world we live in today, it's not just good enough that your buyer actually understands your message, but it's really important that they're able to go and tell your story to others in a way that's memorable, concise, repeatable, like I said, right? I think the best way to think about this is when Steve Jobs first launched the iPod. I know many of you may not have been born then, but he didn't talk about the scroll feature. He didn't talk about iTunes. He didn't talk about it was built on .Mac 3.33s. He literally said 1,000 songs in your pocket. And I think that's a really, really great way of like distilling down the features and the value of a product versus talking about, the actual tool or the product. And then the last thing is, especially if it's a people manager, I look for leadership. So is it someone that can recruit? Is it someone that can hire? And even if it's not a people management position, is it someone that can be a good communicator and inspire organizations to get things done? As you guys know, product marketing is a lot of impact and influence. Like I said at the beginning, working closely with product, with demand gen, et cetera. And so you really have to be able to drive impact and influence without authority. And that is part of the art and science of successful product marketing. All right, Al has a question. Sheena, if you're a career switcher, what is the best way to position yourself as a candidate? Oh, really good question. So let me just first start by saying, like, there's generally been 2 types of candidates that have come to me with this question. I see a lot of career switchers from consulting, and then people who have like I would say more general marketing or journalism background. I think the best way to be able to switch is to, number one, build a really strong portfolio, which you kind of talked about already. Especially if you're an ex-consultant, you probably, again, stripping away the names of the companies and the financials, have a strong portfolio of work in terms of like go-to-market strategy, strategic thinking, taking different products, whether it be for CPGs or whatever, to market. Like really build that out and find 1 or 2 pieces of your best work and put that in a portfolio. I think on the marketing or on the journalism side, you obviously have done a lot of great writing. Clear writing indicates to me clear thinking. So you already have a leg up in that sense. So, like I said, that's something that you can clearly put into your portfolio. So number 1 is like, do your work, your homework, get your portfolio together. Number 2, obviously make sure your resume is up to date. Now, most modern resume or whatever you want to call it, companies, the way they look at resumes is they have bots actually run through the resume and look for keywords. So it was funny. A product marketer that I talked to recently, what he did is he found the top 20 companies that he really wanted to work at. Let's say they were Uber, Lyft, whatever. He found the product marketing job descriptions, and he basically ran an algorithm or scraped like what were the top words that like Uber and Lyft and all these companies that he was interested in were using in their resume. And then he obviously updated his resume with those specific words. So if it was more around go-to-market strategy, he put that in. Was it pricing and packaging? If it was strategic thinker, if it was the ability to lead a team, I mean, within reason, right? He put that on his resume. So that's just a little like tip and trick, maybe side hustle for you guys who don't live here or may not have as strong of a network here. I will say if you're coming to the Bay Area, a lot of it is network in terms of who you know, because thousands of people apply for roles at Salesforce, for example. And so, number 1, if you want to get past that bot, you want to make sure your resume has some of those keywords. And if not, the most recommended route I give to you is actually to try to find a loose connection. So how loose is loose? Well, I'll tell you my own story, and then you can take what you want from that. So I have a lot of empathy for people who don't live in Silicon Valley and don't come from business school and are trying to find a job here, because you have no idea what's a good company to work for, and like what's a good manager team, what's a good space. Like there's just thousands of companies, right? So before I lived here, I was actually living in Singapore, and I worked at Microsoft. So again, knew nothing really of the startup space. And I mean, I just hustled. I basically made a list of all the companies that I was interested in. And then I looked at LinkedIn, which is an awesome tool, and saw if I had a first connection or a second connection to anyone at those companies. I'd say, hey, Mike, see that you know my friend Al over at Salesforce. Would you be willing to make an intro in? And I literally write the email for Mike, so he could literally copy and paste with my resume over to Al to say, hey, like, would you be, willing to grab coffee, or can I buy you lunch? I'm really interested in learning more about like what product marketing does at your company. The way I actually ended up at Marketo is super random. Like I had a literally degree connection to the VP of business development there. And he was so nice. He was like, hey, I don't have time for lunch or coffee, but I'm happy to submit your resume. And I told him I'm on an accelerated schedule because I'm literally only in the States from X to Y date. And we got the interview done. So yeah, that shows you the power of hustle, and that you don't need to be super well connected. You don't need to have the perfect resume. You don't need to, have the perfect bot passing system in place. Like it's really about where the connections that you're able to make, and like hustling for those connections. Probably 30 to 40% of people that I LinkedIn messaged never responded, and that's okay. But you know what? A good percentage of them did. And whenever I get those connections or requests from LinkedIn, I'm always willing to help, just because I'm a big believer in give, give, give. So we talked about getting your portfolio ready. We talked about getting your resume ready. We talked about hustling and trying to get a referral in. Oh, the last thing, I think most of you know this, but just stating the obvious is, in that example I just gave you, let's say that Al's at Salesforce and he refers me in, he gets a monetary bonus if that works out. So he's highly incented to bring in talent as well. And depending on the company, it could be anything from $500. I've seen up to like $15,000 for an engineer. So one day product marketing will get up there, but $200 to $2,500 is standard. So don't be shy to ask. The incentives work very well both ways in terms of like company sourcing for good talent. So really, really, really try to get your foot. That's how you get your kind of foot in the door and be able to have that informational before you have a full interview. Now, in order to prep for that interview or for that informational, like obviously, like I said, domain expertise, learn about the space, learn about the company, learn about the competitors, learn about the marketplace, and come in with like 3 or 4 questions that are not just, what do you expect from me on my first 30, 60, 90 days? Or what do you think successful product marketing, looks like here? You can certainly ask that one. But like if it's about healthcare, like, hey, I really see that, regulators are really starting to look at the direct to consumer space. Like, what do you think the implications of that on your business are over the next 3 to 5 years? Or if you're in the, contract management space, right? Like, hey, you have a limited number of target people you can sell to, like TAM, right? You can basically sell general counsels and procurement. Where do you expect to go beyond that as your next buyer if you think about adjacent markets? So you see how those questions are, I call them layer 2 questions. They're a little bit more deep and they're a little bit more in depth, and shows a certain level of intelligence and, more importantly, clear thinking, and that you just read something on Google versus just like coming in and saying, hey, spoon feed me my 30, 60, 90-day plan, or asking some of these generic questions. Because when you have that informational, you want to leave a lasting impression. That's like the key of like, oh, I remember Sheena, she was really smart, right? And the reason I think she was smart because she actually like answered this one particular question, or she asked this thing this way. And I think that, like I said, alongside your portfolio, like gives you a chance to really stand out from people that may have already an existing product marketing resume. Yeah, so that's kind of my guidance around career switching. And the other thing is you have to get into the psyche a little bit of a hiring manager. So what I mean by that is that hiring managers, they're incented to manage downside risk, right? Like if you think about it, what they are really aiming to do is make sure that if I hire Sheena in, she's actually not only gonna like do the job, like she just needs to be able to do the job. Because if she doesn't do the job, then I have to do the job. And then that means I have to spend my nights and weekends doing Sheena's job. Right? If she kicks ass at that job, that's awesome. That's all upside. But a lot of it is just, hey, is Sheena actually capable of doing the job? So if you have that mentality of downside risk, and this is definitely not all managers, right? I want to be really clear. This is most managers I've seen and work with, then they're not willing to take a lot of risks. So that's why when you hear the, oh, we want someone who's actually done it before excuse, which many of you may have heard, and if you've been interviewing, that's where that really comes from. We're looking for someone who's done it before is maybe a paraphrase of like, I want to make sure that whoever comes into the role is successful and that I don't end up doing their job and spending my nights and weekends doing that. Is that the right way that hiring should go? Absolutely not. I think that in many ways is the beauty of startups, that, many ways the job is a job that no one's ever done. It's in a domain no one's ever, mastered. So there's a lot more flexibility and a lot more like upward movement and mobility there, and opportunity to kind of carve out what it is that you are doing and bringing your unique sets of skills there. But I will say that is the mentality of a product marketer or manager, especially. If you have a journalism background but no marketing experience per se, Lauren, question, what's the best way to break into product marketing? So I don't know, Lauren, if you heard what I was saying earlier. Actually, a lot of product marketers that I see and that I've hired for have either a management strategy or consulting background, or they have a journalism, or I would call it general marketing background. So they're like really great at storytelling. And I one of the things I was saying earlier was around like building your portfolio. So writing samples, storytelling, anytime that you were able to take a really complicated issue, problem, thing and distill it down into something that was easy to understand. Jason, I can't think of his last name right now. He's a founder at Basecamp. He writes a really great book about how when you have two candidates that are neck and neck for a job, pick the one that's a better writer. And the reason that is better writing connotes better thinking, or clearer thinking, I should say. Clearer writing is clearer thinking. And I'm really, really, really a big believer in that. And you wouldn't be amazed at how many product marketers who stumbled into the job are not great writers. And I don't understand how that happens, because 80% of what we do is creating collateral, like sales enablement, like blogs, like, writing messaging, positioning, and things like that. So if you have a journalism background, showcase that, lean on your strength, show your best stories, even if they're not in a B2B context, even if it's about you telling a story about your grandma going to the store. Like, what I want to see is that you can, in a concise, memorable, repeatable way, take a complex idea and distill it down into easy stories. And like I said, create that in your portfolio and send it with your resume. Do not wait to be asked. Just be proactive, show up, right? And be proud of that, because that's a huge strength of yours. Hopefully that was helpful, Lauren. Happy to follow up on anybody's question in case we don't get to it. Eamon, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, or it's Iman. Nice to meet you. Thanks for joining. Hi, Sheena. We know that communication skills are critical for PMM positions. How do you see the hiring chances of a foreigner whose native language is not English? Very good question, Eamon. This actually dovetails a little bit into my previous question, from Lauren. Written communication is universal. So I think that that's awesome, that I think you are just as much at a play advantage as Lauren and the rest of us, and I'm assuming you're a native speaker, Lauren. I will say, and I'm going to call a spade, there's a lot of unconscious bias in the interview process. I actually found myself doing it, and my legal name starts with an X. I have a maiden name that's Xingyuan, right? And it looks weird. It's like XYZ, literally is like my legal name. And I found myself whenever like looking at resumes, like unconsciously getting biased. And I actually literally started telling my recruiter, send them in blank. Like, I don't want to see the names because I don't want to be influenced by it. But to your point, it's not just the resume, right? It's actually like the screening call, and also your on-site, right? At the end of the day, play to your strengths and know your value. And if that hiring manager in that company is not going to like take a swing at you because of their unconscious bias or conscious bias, like, they don't deserve you. And I really, really mean that. So play to your strengths, be the best, PMM candidate that you can be, get your portfolio in order, get your resume in order. I don't know if you guys were on earlier when I was talking about the resume hacking and trying to get past those bots, especially being very, very, very targeted to the companies you want to work for. But hold that truth and hold that authenticity for yourself, because like you and I unfortunately aren't able to fix it. But writing samples, written word, all that stuff, like that gives us all a even playing field. And I think you should continue to play for your strengths. Hopefully that's helpful, and happy to, like I said, follow up. Liz, Who is doing the best and most thoughtful writing on PMM right now? Who should I follow on Medium? There's a guy named Paul O'Connor on Medium. He started writing about PMM a few years ago, but now he does a really beautiful thing where he kind of opens it up to product marketers from all over the world to submit posts about product marketing. And some of them I agree with, some of them I don't disagree with, but I think they're thoughtful. I think part of the issue is that product marketing is really, really, for those who joined earlier, like defined differently in different companies. Sometimes it's more inbound, sometimes it's more outbound. I've seen product marketing report to product and you're just doing like release notes, which blows my mind that in 2019, that's what people would spend a resource like product marketing on. But I think Paul O'Connor does a good job of curating a lot of this content and helping people to better at least get insight into what each other is doing in terms of like best practice and stuff. Actually, you know, that's one of the things I'm trying to do with real world product marketing as well, which is like trying to curate some best practices in terms of like case-based learning. So I actually have a case that's like what we literally went through at Marketo, because what I find, let me take a step back, with most writing, it's just like general glitteralities of like, oh, here's all the things that we do in product marketing, messaging and positioning, right? But what is actually messaging and positioning, and like how do you actually write the sentence? And like I think myself and other people became really good product marketers, not because like we're naturally good at it, it's because we sucked at it at the beginning. And then we had mentors or managers who were able to then take our work, you know, redline the shit out of it and give us a lot of feedback. And from there we iterated it on it and we got better, right? So I hope that answers your question. I think Paul does a good job. I think it's not just only him, but like I said, he curates a good community, which I really appreciate. Can you use papers from B School for writing samples? Yeah, absolutely. Like you should use samples from every walk of your life. Like I said, if it's a personal blog, if it's a professional blog, if it's your B School, I don't think dissertation is the right word, but you know, B School project, like it's anything that you've done that I think shows your best work and taking a very complex idea and being able to, like I said, distill that into things that are memorable, concise, and repeatable. I think also the initiative, just like being thoughtful enough to have a portfolio, like you guys all probably have artist friends, right? And whether they go to like the Parsons or Juilliards of the world, they all have this portfolio where like they labor hours and hours over in building. And I think we should take a similar mentality in product marketing, right? Like that's, again, with real world product marketing, like what I try to build, which is like some of the best learning samples, so that, you know, not that I, you know, would want to be looking for a job, but so that I can reflect back on, okay, this is what good looks like, and this is the bar, this is the standard, this is the quality of work that I can produce, and now I can share that with the world. Going back to the psyche of a hiring manager, and especially, again, this is not everybody, but I think a lot of hiring managers, that whole like downside risk thing, like the stronger your writing samples, the stronger your portfolio, the more confidence that they'll have in that, okay, maybe she hasn't done it before, but I have a high confidence bar that she can figure it out, that she or he is smart, and that, you know, I'm willing to take a bet on her. So hopefully that's helpful in helping to do that. Yes, Ada Chen. Yes, I actually talk about her. That's a good point in my course. But yeah, she does a really great job of talking about what is product marketing, and she distills it enough at the high level that I actually think it's pretty universal. It's championing the customer, communicating product value, and driving product distribution. She does a really great job, I think, of, like I said, championing the buyer. You should understand the buyer of your product better than anyone else at the company, better than at aggregate, right? You know, product might know a particular feature, sales might know a particular account, but you have to champion and understand that buyer better than anyone else in that company, so that as you're thinking about messaging, as you're thinking about positioning, as you're thinking about pricing and packaging, as you're thinking about go-to-market strategy, you're able to, you know, really, really have the end buyer in mind when creating that. The second thing is driving, like communicating product value. So like some of that we talked about, but that's the communication piece that I was talking about: storytelling, messaging, positioning. That's why having a general marketing background or journalism background is really, really, really like natural path, I would say, to product marketing, because you have a natural ability to take a ton of data and distill the most interesting facts from it. And then the last thing is driving product distribution. So this is where the B School kids and the management consultant really come to play. what's the framework of thinking through like pricing and packaging? Do you have like a platform and apps model where, for example, for the iPhone, you pay a flat fee for this, but then they charge you on apps? You can imagine there's a lot of different models that you can kind of play with there. Product marketing in many ways, for those of you who haven't heard me say this, is kind of where product management was, I would say 10 years ago. Like everybody and their mom wanted one, but I think very few people actually understand what is good product marketing, how do we evaluate it, and like how do we bring products to market in a way that's impactful. And so I think with more and more these like boot camps coming out, definitely, but also just like more leaders coming into the space, we can jointly kind of define what good product marketing looks like. And it's also helpful to have some of this writing as well. Other than researching the company, hi Steffi. Other than researching the company and industry, what other interview tips do you have for us? I don't know if you joined at the beginning, but I had quite a few. I'm happy to go through them some more. So definitely research the company, definitely research the industry. I am a big believer in, I'm sure there's psychiatrists and psychologists out there that can do a better job than I of telling you the science of why this is. But basically within, I would argue, like the first 3 minutes, someone has kind of made the decision, at least of like, yes, leaning yes, or leaning no. So, and then they spend the next 45 minutes or 43 minutes or whatever, kind of like confirmatory diligence, right? Of like, yeah, backing up what I already thought. So I'm a big believer of like first impressions, whatever you believe about that, like science just proves, like we make judgments in our brains as humans within the first, X amount of time that we meet someone. So large companies, especially when you are actually able to, they're more organized and from a recruiting perspective. So you actually get the interview list beforehand. Do research on each of the people, like really stalk their LinkedIn and open with something to disarm them and help them feel comfortable with you. It may be as simple as like, oh, I saw that you spent some time in Texas. I went to UT Austin. Are you a Texas fan? Like find something personal that you can connect with them. It could be even as simple as like, I saw you lived in Bangalore. I went there last summer with my business school trip and I loved it. And I really love this one restaurant. My point is like, people generally, there's always a little bit of awkwardness whenever you meet someone new. And especially in that power dynamic, right? Where it's like interviewer, interviewee, try to level the playing field subtly as much as you can by creating a human connection. It doesn't mean you have to be their best friend. It doesn't mean you have to like tell them a Jim Carrey joke and make them laugh. But I think it just not only makes you feel a little bit more comfortable, but also, it makes the other person feel a little bit more comfortable as well. So I am a big, big believer in just setting yourself up for success. Okay, so that's more of a general interview tip. Product marketing specific, I call it the 80-20 rule. 80% of product marketing interviews are the same. It's like, Sheena, tell me about yourself. Why are you here today? Why are you interested in blank? Tell me about a time you brought a product to market. Tell me about a time you worked with sales. Tell me about a time you did a product launch. Tell me about a time when you led a campaign. So I think one of the things I've seen so I think you may know I do coaching on the side as well for product marketers in terms of helping them, whether you're trying to get into product marketing, whether you're trying to level up your product marketing career, etc. But one of the things I commonly see is like people jump straight into the answer, which makes sense, right? Like it's like in school, it's like, what's 3 + 3? 6, right? But in interviewing, the dynamic is a little bit different. And so instead of, in the example, Sheena, tell me about a time when you brought a product to market, instead of just jumping into, when I was at blank, I did this, and then we launched this, and then here are the results. Like really use that opportunity to showcase your storytelling abilities, especially since product marketing, a lot of it is messaging, positioning, and storytelling. I think it's to Lauren's earlier question about like journalism background, right? So, I'm happy to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the time that I was at Marketo. Marketo was a B2B marketing automation platform, which basically means that we helped digital marketers to engage with their customers in a one-on-one personalized manner across multiple channels. My team specifically there was responsible for X. What my job was Y. The project is blank. Here's the challenge or the tension of that product launch, like why it almost didn't happen or why it almost failed. And then here's what we did and the results. So that's a kind of a cheat. You guys have probably heard of the STAR approach: situation, task, action, result. I think it's the thing I don't like about Star is just very like, yes, it's very factual, but a good element of, so I don't know if anyone's read like Made It Stick, but they have this like success framework, and they say one of the things about a story is that it's memorable, it's got an element of surprise, there's got to be a little bit of tension in there, right? So that's why I like that framework of like, this is the company, this is how they make money, this is what they do, here's what my team did, or here's what I did, here's what the project was, here's like why it almost failed, or here's a challenge of that product, right? Like we were responsible at Marketo for pushing up into the enterprise space and making sure that we hit certain targets. And that was really hard because Oracle and Salesforce were there, and they will give away the product for free because they're not worried about money, right? And they're just trying to gain market share. And so what my team specifically did was da 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 da, and the results we saw were da 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 da. So yeah, that's a little bit of like background there. I do agree that Drift and HubSpot have good content. I would say it's very SMB focused. I think Drift gets good marketing, period. I mean, it's the same guy, right, who started Drift and HubSpot. I don't love their product marketing content, but we can agree to disagree there, Al. I think they have okay, taking a step back, I know the space intimately well because HubSpot and Marketo are competitors. They win the SMB space very well because they talk human versus like B2B corporate speak, which sounds like a robot. And so I really love that they do a good job of talking to you, Sheena, and trying to win your heart and mind and appealing to the emotional stuff. Does it have that much substance? Depends on the piece. I've seen some really amazing pieces, and some pieces I've been like, right? Like it's hard to keep a really high bar on these things as you get bigger. Hi, Shannon. Random question. Uh-oh. I get scared when I read that. You don't have to answer right away. Okay. What strategies do product marketers use when their product is in a crowded market or a product isn't actually that great? Well, good for you, first of all, for having that self-awareness. This is a much more complex question. I think I would have to ask 5 layers of why. Like, why is the product not great? Is it that, the engineers, we have a great roadmap and the engineers just can't deliver on time? Is it that the features actually suck? Is it that the product leader sucks? Is it that the CEO is a marketing and sales person, has no understanding about product? Is it that it was a merger and acquisition and the integration didn't actually happen? So I think there's different solutions to that, or different ways I would answer that based on what the reason is why the product isn't great. I'll go more general, which is like, it's hard to market a product that isn't wonderful. Having said that, for myself, that's my personal value. Having said that, there are great companies out there that have built sales and marketing machines with, you could argue, like products that aren't, the best. And I would argue, especially in like B2B SaaS, it's not always the best products that win, right? It's actually like the sales and marketing machines. And that's why it's a SaaS business where like you lose money because you're spending so much on sales and marketing. I think the biggest, well, let me answer your question this way. The best way to differentiate your product, whether it is a quality product or whether it's in a really crowded market, is to understand what your differentiators are and communicating that extremely clearly. And I think the way that you should think about differentiators is like, what's unique to your product, right? That no one else in the market can do. So only, your company, or only product, only widget can blank, right? And once you're really clear on what are your differentiators, and hopefully you have some, and if not, like talk to your product team and be like, hey, where is this going, right? Then you have an anchoring point to then build a story around that, about why that particular pain that feature solves is, so much more valuable than anything else in the market. At Marketo, like going back to my HubSpot comment, like I, saw that like there was a lot of crowded market, right? Like HubSpot, Oracle, Salesforce, Silverpop, all these other things as well. And, one of the things that we really did was actually do more, and this is a dirty word, but maybe like category creation. What I mean by that is like marketing automation. Everybody was just selling feature function. Like we do email marketing, we do mobile marketing, we do lead generation, we do API calls, etc. And we basically said, we actually don't do marketing automation. That's what everyone else does. But what we actually do is we do engagement marketing, and we've built like an engagement marketing platform to be able to help you, connect with your customers in a way that's, one-on-one and personalized. And then we did some messaging around the ABCDEs of marketing. So like as individuals, based on what they do, continuously over time, directed towards an outcome everywhere they are. It's kind of crazy. Good messaging. Like 5 years later, you can still remember it, right? That's my point about memorable, concise, and repeatable. Okay. Hi, Ken. Hopefully, Shannon, that was helpful for you. Just looking to see if there's any other questions that I missed. Uh, Liz, didn't you have a whole list of them earlier? Just paste them in here. I thought we wouldn't get to them because we had so many people join, but I am happy to get to them. Let's see, what else do you guys want to know about product marketing? It doesn't only have to be for those who are interviewing. It could also be for people who are hiring, just general career questions. For those of you who joined a little bit late, about my background, I worked for like 8 years at Microsoft and Marketo in US and Asia, working on SQL Server and also on marketing automation, although we then changed it to engagement marketing. I now run my own product marketing consulting company where we do like go-to-market strategy, sales enablement, et cetera, for Silicon Valley companies. And then I also teach real-world product marketing, which is a case-based online learning platform for product marketers to learn more about the function and craft. So yeah, I hope that you guys find this valuable. If you do, I'm happy to do it continuously. It's just an experiment. All right, what companies are doing cutting product marketing? I think I touched on that. What companies? Oh, okay, same question. Cutting edge. Well, the funny thing about product marketing, and probably something we should talk about, is like it can be really hard to define because product marketing is so not well defined. It can be really hard to define like what cutting edge even means. Like what are the KPIs? So I'll tell you the pieces. And again, it depends on if it's like inbound or outbound. Maybe if product marketing is quote unquote inbound or technical product marketing, then you could argue you define that by saying like who does the best job of telling their roadmap story, who does the best job of like telling their like features and functions, and doing cross-sell and upsell with their existing customer base in a B2B scenario, right? If it's more on the outbound side, maybe it's like who runs the best sales enablement boot camps or academies, who has more of a GM mentality and consistently hits revenue metrics, increases win rates, has strong pipeline, etc. I think the product marketing teams that have been the most established, obviously, are the companies that really you can get good training in, if that's what the question is. So what I mean by that is like, cultures of a company generally are defined by their CEO, right? Like Mark Benioff, he's a sales guy. So he's a strong believer in sales and marketing. Mark Zuckerberg is obviously a product guy. So product probably runs a show, right, at Facebook. You guys tell me if anyone's on Facebook and works at Facebook, I should say. Microsoft, I think it's shifted. It used to be, obviously, when Bill was there, a very product engineering team. Then went very marketing and sales. When Ballmer was there, which were the years I was there, it may have shifted then since. But my point is, if you want to really cut your teeth and learn the basics of product marketing, I would go to a big company because you'll get that formal training, at a Microsoft, at a Google, at a potentially Salesforce, Adobe, etc. It doesn't mean that product marketing won't mean something a little bit different at those companies, but you'll really learn from like what it should be like, right, in a structured environment. Because when you start going to smaller and smaller environments, it just gets more like chaotic because there's just a million things to do in a small company, right? Someone needs to write product documentation, someone needs to write the help article, someone needs to do the app queue, someone needs to lead community, someone needs to also do messaging, positioning, go-to-market strategy, etc. So yeah, like it just really, really, really depends on what you're looking for, I think, when you look to join a company. Look, there's trade-offs in everything you do. Elizabeth Gilbert wrote Eat, Pray, Love, and one thing she says that I love in her book, big magic is the concept of a shit sandwich. Like in everything that you do in life, there's a shit sandwich. And so just figure out what's the shit sandwich that you're willing to eat. At Microsoft, for example, I got to get really great like product marketing knowledge and cut my teeth at that. I think the challenge is that like I basically worked on a small product, right? That like frankly it was a rounding error to Microsoft's P&L, right? And I will say, at least at Microsoft, like if you're good and you're really competent, you can move up really, really quickly and they'll give you more and more responsibility. And I had opportunities, like I said, to go to Asia and run a $2 billion business across 9 countries that I otherwise would have never had. So that is sort of the trade-off, right? At a small company, obviously you have upside, you have equity, if you can learn a lot because you do more things, but there may or may not be that structure, especially if you're earlier in your career, and you might be at risk of being ping-ponged around if there isn't a clear definition across the company of what product marketing is. How do events factor into product marketing? Thank you, Liz. I do remember reading these now. I think you have an events background, if I remember correctly. I did stalk your LinkedIn today. See, know your audience. So events definitely, I would say, are usually done through the events team. Whether if you have like an events specialist or if you're big enough to have like a director of events. I'm sure Salesforce and Microsoft have whole teams for Dreamforce and their big conferences. Generally, the way product interacts with that is actually via like messaging and positioning. So depending on the event, if it's Dreamforce, like what is the like main topic or what's the main message? Because people can only consume so many messages, right? I remember a couple years ago at Dreamforce, it was all about like Einstein, right? And that was like the big message. And so I'm sure there were a bunch of product marketers that sit around a table and said, okay, if that's the big thing, what are our 3 supporting pillars and how do we take that to market? So I think that's the best way to think about it in terms of how events work with product marketing. I've also personally spoken at over, 50 events because obviously we are supposed to be the SMEs, right? The subject matter experts on the product, the domain, the space, the buyer, the industry. So often we get tapped to speak at events. So for those of you who are familiar with Argyle, they have like a lot of CX level dinners. I've probably spoken at, 15 of them. We've done like Forrester road shows. So speaking with a Forrester analyst, I've probably done 15 to 20 of those. Anyway, like executive dinners, industry events, healthcare events, financial services events. So that's generally how we work together with the events team. First, we do the messaging and positioning and think through like what is the main thing that we actually want to get across. And then we actually go into many times often get tapped for actually doing the speaking and delivering the message. Going back to the need of being a good communicator. Having said that, I want to make one thing clear. Just because you're not a good or comfortable public speaker doesn't mean that you can't do product marketing. There's different types of product marketing. You guys who may have joined later didn't hear me talk about inbound and outbound. Doesn't mean like you are expected to go out and be the face of the product. It means you have to like communicate effectively, definitely, right, internally in terms of driving projects and impact and influence, et cetera. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to like, drive, be like, be a Sheryl Sandberg on stage talking about your product. Like there's different types of product marketing. And I think it's about playing to your strengths and finding what works for you. And more importantly, like find a role, find a team, find a company that like really, really values you. Ooh, what is the average salary for a PMM in the Bay? Somebody wasn't shy. Maybe everybody was thinking that, maybe not. I will say it depends. It's funny, I actually, so a quick shameless plug, one other group that I'm involved in is Product Marketing Masters. So we're just a community of 500 plus online people that, really are just trying to learn about product marketing. And so I recently posted in there and asked people to submit their salaries. And I will say it's just kind of like all over it was an anonymous survey. I had like an end of less than 50. And so it wasn't a ton of responses, but the responses were kind of all over the board. I think there's like benchmarks, right? So like, and the first thing I'll say is like, then another big mistake I see product marketers make is that they anchor on their base salary and they get like too tied up in that because they're like, oh, I'm only making 120. Do you think I should go up to 125? And it's like, okay, what's your total compensation package? What's your base? What's your bonus? And more importantly, especially if you work in a startup, like what's your equity? because that's where, frankly, hopefully if your company does well, you're going to make the most of your compensation. And it's really, really, really important to understand how equity is calculated. I'm definitely not going to go into the full nuances of that tonight, but understand what the denominator is. Like if you have 8,000 shares, wonderful. 8,000 out of what? 8,000 out of 8,000, 8,000 out of 16,000, 8,000 out of 8 million, right? And also with further rounds, like how do you further get diluted and what is strike price and all that stuff. If you're at a public company, maybe it's a little bit more straightforward, right? Like obviously it's whatever it's listed at. But whenever I think about pay, I always think about total compensation. I encourage you to negotiate on your total compensation and not on your base. Don't get short-term greedy and give up some pretty long-term rewards. The other thing I'll say about pay is that like you can always negotiate for more equity, even at a public company when you go in. So at a few companies I've worked at now, whether it be for retention or whether it be for performance or whether it be for whatever, I've gotten grants of equity after I started at the company. And obviously they vested, over whatever schedule. But my point is just that number that you go in initially with or that package, it can be dynamic. Everything is negotiable in this world. So let's see, I don't know total compensation package, but I can give you bands. And I think this is like pretty public. There's this, I forget what it's called right now, but there's this like public database of like salaries. But I think in the Bay Area, at least, like, if you're at a PMM range, and don't quote me, at least on base, right? It's like target is 120, between 100 to 130. Senior is like 135-ish, so let's call it 160 senior PMM. That's just base. And then director can be 160, let's say target 180 up to 190, and then senior director is above that. And then VP, at that point, you're really, like I said, not making your money off of base, you're really making your money off of equity. Super dependent upon company, super dependent upon stage. A lot of early stage companies will pay you significantly below that. So for those of you who are watching this and like, oh my God, like my number is not there, like I'm getting underpaid, maybe not actually, right? Because you probably have a huge equity grant. And that's frankly like how these companies who, are using cash and reinvesting it in their business as they should, are compensating their employees. So, I guess I tell you these numbers in an effort to be, I hope to be transparent, because I believe that knowledge is power, and I ask that you use these numbers wisely. And I'm happy to have a one-on-one conversation with anyone offline about, their package and stuff like that, like no judgment. I will also say that all of this is negotiable, and be wise in negotiating the entire package if you heard one thing from me today. I had a lunch with a girlfriend last Saturday who's moving to London with her company. And she was like, I literally don't know what to negotiate with my package. And I was like, oh, did you ask about housing? Did you ask about moving expenses? Did you ask about taxes? Because taxes get obviously complicated when you live abroad. You have to pay US taxes. Did you ask about like certain number of trips that they're willing to pay for you backstage? Like my point is, like, because I'd gone through that experience, for those of you who joined late, I used to live in Singapore and I had an expat stint with Microsoft. Like I knew all these things that I could at least inform her with, and she could go back and talk to her company and do whatever she wanted with. So I'm a big believer in sharing the knowledge. Just like I said, don't get caught up on like a specific number or anything like that. Just really think about what's the total package, what's the stage of my company. And also, if you take one thing away from tonight, like understand what is the value that is extremely important to you at this stage in your career. So generally in a job, there's like 5 things you really care about, right? There's like the pay, compensation, there's your direct manager, there's the space, right? So like digital health or something like that. There's the culture, and then there's the product. And at different stages of like your life, you're going to value different things. Like for me, when I was young, I just wanted like a shit ton of money with like a really great company, right? The rest stuff probably was very low on that list. Now at this stage of my career, it obviously looks very different. So I think whenever you go into any sort of salary negotiation, or beyond that salary negotiation, just even understanding like what kind of job should I apply for, what should I be doing with my career, do the work to sit by yourself and understand what's actually important to me. And don't say all 5. For anyone who's read like the 5 languages of love, like it's funny, my boyfriend always makes fun of me because he's like, you can't have more than 2, you can only have 2. And I don't agree with that. But at least for this exercise, I actually do agree with him. Like figure out, the top 2 things that are just really important to you and optimize for those. So my point is, if you're like, hey, I really want to work at this company and I really want to work for this person and I really want a great manager because I'm going to learn blank and blank from her or him, then if salary's not that important to you, and if whatever's not important to you, and the culture is whatever, just be willing to realize, okay, that's an 18-month, 2-year extent, and that I'm willing to sacrifice in order to get those things because that's important to me. Hopefully that makes sense. I saw some people that maybe weren't so happy with that, so that's my truth, and I'll stick with it. Shannon, in a startup company with a very preliminary product, where is the most value added for product marketing? Wow, there's a lot of questions. Okay, I'll try to answer them one by one. In a startup company with a very preliminary product, what is the most value add for a product marketer? I'm assuming in a startup company with a very preliminary product, you have yet to find product market fit. What I mean by that is you have not yet found a repeatable cycle of business. You haven't found something that you're like, yep, whenever we do this, we sell product. And so let's throw gasoline on that. So your number one job as a product marketer is to work together with your product team to figure out what does product market fit look like for you. It could be a feature, it could be a product, it could be an audience, right? Like maybe you have the right product for the wrong audience. It could be a distribution strategy. Maybe you shouldn't be selling direct. Maybe you should be going through a channel. Maybe you should be like Dropbox and go B2C and do like free trial or something like that. So that is your probably highest value add at this stage in a company. Help them find product market fit as quickly as possible because that will drive more revenue and more importantly, elevate you within the company in terms of helping to drive like a business model that's sustainable. What are some of the uncommon sects of product marketing? I'm assuming that's aspects that don't require a degree in engineering or non-tech. What are some uncommon sections of product marketing that don't require a degree in engineering, non-tech? Sorry, Shannon, I don't think I understand that question. I don't have a degree in product marketing. I'm not technical. I have a finance background. Anyone who is curious, I hated finance. A big mistake. Tiger mom. I had a marketing minor, so I guess I kind of stood up for myself, but I don't think it's required to have a technical background. I told you guys my background. I started as a SQL Server product marketer. I had no idea what SQL even was when I walked into that interview. I still have a loose understanding of it. I'm just kidding. So I don't think that's a huge requirement at all. Hypothetical role playing. If an interview handed you an ordinary pen and asked you to sell it to a customer, what key points would you need to hit within the first 30 seconds? Hypothetical situation or that's happened to you? All right, this is the classic, like what do you call it? Gordon, what's the guy from the Wall Street movie? Gordon Gekko, like, sell me this pen. I'm not going to answer that question because I don't think you guys want to like take that exact wording and apply it for yourselves. You should find your own way to talk about that. But I'll give you the framework to think about it. Again, I'm a big believer teaching people versus do. You may have heard, if you've spent enough time with me, this concept of the shovel versus the hole. I'm not original. I didn't come up with it. My old CMO at Marketo, Sanjay Dalakia, used to say this, and I thought it was just genius. So any marketer worth their salt can talk about the shovel. It's 5 feet long. It has an aluminum base, a wooden handle, feature function, feature function, feature function, boring, not memorable. Really great marketers, really great storytellers are able to actually talk about the whole. What's the problem? What's the value statement? What's the benefit? What's the value proposition that it actually solves for the user? So for those of you who were on earlier, you guys heard me talk about the iPod, 1,000 songs in your pocket. Nothing about the scroll wheel, nothing about iTunes, nothing about the fact that it was built on Mac 3.0, blah, 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 blah. Did it come later on? Absolutely, right? The specs, feature, text, I'm sure if you scrolled down, like, I'm sure in the keynote that happened X years ago, Steve Jobs talked about that. But it was just a really simple statement of what exactly the iPod did for you without talking about memory and chords and anything like that. So I guess what I'm trying to help you guys learn is actually around this concept of the whole, like articulate what's the value statement, what's the benefit that the pen actually provides, right? And from there, understand what's uniquely valuable about that pen in the eyes of the person you're selling it. For example, if I'm selling a pen to a lawyer, that's gonna be very different than selling it to a construction worker and selling it to a Taco Bell employee, right? Like their use cases are just gonna be really different. So think about the whole in the context of the person that you're selling it with too. Hopefully that's helpful. All right, Liz, what are 3 things that you should be able to do on your first grade? I can't speak English today. What are 3 things that you should be able to do on your first day in order to hit the ground running? I'm assuming this is like once you've gotten the job. I really like, I don't know if should, that's a very strong word. Obviously, that's going to be dependent upon your hiring manager. When I've hired PMMs in the past, I am a big believer, like, you kind of own your onboarding. Like, yes, there's an onboarding document that I will give you, right? And you have to work with HR to get set up in our system and get access to Salesforce and all that stuff. But like, number one, figure out like your own onboarding. Like what I mean by that is like, come up with a structured plan, 30, 60, 90-day plan of like, okay, first I'm going to do a listening tour, and here are the key people. You may not know their names, but you probably know like some roles. At least you can take a guess. You probably need to meet with the head of sales. You probably need to meet with someone in marketing. Probably need to meet with someone in customer success, right? And then like go submit that to your manager and be like, hey, what am I missing? I don't know what I don't know. Just taking that initiative, right, of like coming up with your own onboarding plan, just with the basic knowledge that you had either from like the interview process or just like talking to colleagues or whatever. So like that's one big thing that I'm like a big proponent that successful product marketers should be able to do on day one. And not only successful, just like showing initiative and showing like, I don't know, the ability to get things done, and ownership and accountability and proactiveness. That's the word I'm looking for. I think number two, really understand the product. You obviously, goes without saying, domain expertise. Like if you don't understand fundamentally what the product is, I don't think you can be a successful product marketer. So go actually get a login to the product, play around in it. Figure out like, you know, what do you like about it? What do you not like about it? Put yourself into the shoes of the user, right? So really at least familiarize yourself with the product, right? On day one, I don't think that's hit the ground running, but I think you should, I will say if it's a B2C product and you can get access to it, you should have done that before you got to the company. Like if it's Dropbox or something, just go use Dropbox and understand. Hopefully you did that in the interview process, but if you didn't, definitely like start going to the level 200, 300 so that when you're in these meetings, you're not like, what are they talking about? You at least have some context. And the third thing I would say to hit the ground running is like read up on the industry. It's simple. Set up like Google alerts of like the competitors and things like get a sense of what's going on in the industry. If it's digital health, like who are the companies that are hot, who's getting investment, who's not, etc. Just like my point is, so when you get in there, you feel like you have some value to add, right? Beyond just like obviously being smart and being enthusiastic and ready to go. All right, we're at time, and I think there's quite a few additional questions here. So let's do this. For those questions that I didn't get to, first give me feedback if this was helpful. If it wasn't helpful, you can reach out to me directly, or you can reach out to me, Sheena at productmarketingmasters.com. A quick plug, we have an event on Tuesday for those of you in San Francisco around sales enablement. We have Liz from Copper and Priyanka from Gainsight. They'll be talking a little bit about that. And then, I also have a lot of free resources and videos on this page, but also on the course as well. There's a lot of, you can create an account and watch a lot of the free previews. I do a whole thing on like, what is product marketing, a little bit more about my journey and stuff like that, as well as some other resources that might be helpful for you. Let's see. I think if I leave one piece of like parting advice for product marketers, it would be that like find your own journey. What I mean by that is like, just because we were a product marketer at Salesforce or Microsoft or Adobe or some sexy name, like it doesn't mean that like we are the golden standard of product marketing. It's such a new function that there's still a lot of education that you can do to your organization about it. Ultimately, I find that whenever you align yourself with revenue, it's always a good sign. If you can help prove to the company that you're, driving revenue for them, that's always a good sign. So whether that means you're empowering sales and you're helping them close deals, whether that means you're driving the pricing and packaging strategy, whether that means you're, helping to drive that product market fit, like I was saying earlier, to help establish a repeatable, scalable, like revenue process, then go and do that. That's how you become valuable at an organization. And that's the role I would argue you should be taking as a product marketer. So yes, there's the common definitions of like what is product marketing, but there's an intuition piece of it as well, which is like if you champion the customer and like understand what they need, and if you can communicate to them in a way that's memorable, concise, repeatable, in the way that tells a story, and then if you can actually then drive the right product distribution, which sounds easier said than done, trust me, whether that be direct, whether it be through channel, or whether that be through like I'm going to call it free trial method, like what the Dropbox, Atlassians, and others are doing, then like I really encourage you guys to explore that. And I feel like, also with your own strengths, like, look, I'm not trying to typecast people. I'm not saying just because you have a journalism or marketing background, you can't do the strategy side. Just because you have a strategy side doesn't mean that you can't do the storytelling or whatever side. It's just more that that's going to be probably your strength because that's what you've done in the past. And it doesn't mean you can't go and learn the other side. I have a background in neither. So, I'm still learning a lot about this space and, how we go and get better. So with that, we are at time. If you have any other questions, feel free to DM me, give me feedback, what you liked, what you didn't like. The biggest room for me in the world is a room for improvement. And I hope that you guys found this valuable. And then if you do, I'm happy to do it, like I said, on a weekly basis or whatever rhythm, that makes sense for everybody, and go from there. All right, guys, have a good night then, or day, wherever you are.